What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to College Football Talk with Peter, Burt, and Ed, going over my takeaways from the Week 6 action. It was a stunning Week 6, I think, as we might have somewhat expected. When there's a slate that only has one ranked game, not a lot of interesting matchups, it's a recipe for chaos, and we had plenty of that in Week 6. It was a week that was reminiscent of the 2007 season when there was a curse of the number 2 team. I think the team that was ranked second lost something like maybe 7 times, if not more than that season. There were a lot of other upsets, and that's what Week 6 of the college football season looked like. But before I get into it, if you go on to enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like, consider subscribing to the channel, and turn on those post notifications so you're always up to date whenever I upload. But starting things out, going over a couple of the teams that actually took care of business and looked like championship caliber teams. Ohio State with a 35-7 win over Iowa. They surged ahead in the second half. It was only 7-0 at halftime. Jeremiah Smith gets another highlight reel one-handed catch, and the Buckeyes get a comfortable win there. Oregon on Friday night took care of business against Michigan State. I think kind of had to work into the game a little bit, but overall got a win. And those two teams, of course, are setting up for a huge date in Eugene this coming Saturday with the number 2 Buckeyes going up against the number 3 Ducks. Those are only teams that played that looked like championship caliber teams. Texas was on a bye. They're going to be going to the Cotton Bowl, of course, to face Oklahoma this coming week. Miami did show a little bit of championship caliber as well. They showed guts, I would say, really, just like Reese Davis did on the call. If you heard it, his voice was completely shot, but credit to him for fighting through that. They battled back from a big deficit in this one. I think it was something like, I know it was 38, I think, to 21 at one point, and it was even more than that. I think they trailed by 21 in that game. Big comeback win for the Hurricanes. I think they did benefit from another questionable call. Ineligible man downfield penalty late for the Hurricanes. I think there was also a debatable targeting as well. So the Hurricanes get away with a win in Berkeley. College game day was there. A big atmosphere for the Golden Bears. Not quite able to pull the upset. But the team that was able to pull the upset, pulled maybe the best upset of all time. It is the Vanderbilt Commodores. 0-60 against top 5 teams going into this game with, I believe, 23, if not more than that, straight losses to the Crimson Tide. Vanderbilt gets an upset win over number 1 Alabama. This is a team that has just 2 SEC wins in the last 6 years going in, or last 5 years going into this game. They had won just 2 games in conference play. Both came in 2022 since 2019 when they won just 1. So that's 3 wins over the last 5 years going into this one. Clark Lee, their head coach, is a Vanderbilt alum, and he led the Commodores to a game plan that really allowed them to keep the Crimson Tide in check, and they were really kind of in a comfortable position. They were up by a couple of scores late. Alabama got a score, and overall just a phenomenal game. They were able to get the job done by getting some first downs late to seal the win. Diego Pavia had a great game, an all-time interview afterwards where he quickly went from praising God to dropping an F-bomb on national TV that was not censored in time by ESPN. So a huge win. I think it was the SEC Network, actually. Huge win for the Commodores, and that was just the start of the day's chaos. Then Arkansas, their defense shut down Tennessee, which has been one of the best offenses in college football. So that's huge for the Razorbacks defense. And then Taylon Green also played really good football for the Razorbacks. They scored 9. I think they had gone up 6-0 or maybe 3-0. They were up by a little bit, and then they give up a 14-0 run to Tennessee. And then they're able to respond with, I think, a field goal and a touchdown, then a missed 2-point conversion, of course. But what a win, calling the Hogs there in Fayetteville, a huge win that kind of signaled the chaos. Then the number 9 through 11 teams all lost. Missouri lost to a good Texas A&M team, who I want to talk about here. I think the Aggies look legit. They especially have at Kyle Field. I know they lost to Notre Dame, but Notre Dame is looking a lot better outside of that game against Northern Illinois and a little bit against Miami, Ohio. They're 5-1 with just 2 games left against ranked opponents, and those are both at home. They host LSU, who's number 13 right now, and then the regular season finale, of course, their rivalry returns with a game against number 1 Texas. I think if quarterback Connor Weigman can stay healthy, this Aggies team has a serious chance. I know there's a lot of chaos in college football this year, so there's a really good chance, I would say now, they could drop one of these games outside of these two. But I think they have a really good chance to beat the Tigers. I think they maybe even have a chance to upset the Longhorns. Before the season, I did predict that would be one of Texas's losses this season. I believe the other one I think was to Georgia in my preseason predictions. I'd probably say that Texas beats Georgia now. But I genuinely think they have a really good shot at finishing 10-2. One of those losses would be out of conference, so having just one in conference could mean that Texas A&M could compete for the SEC championship game. So that's something to watch, and I think an 11-1 finish is on the table as well. Michigan lost to Washington. Is their season over? I don't think it's over yet, but they really are going to need to get that offense working. Again, had issues with that, and defense didn't play as well as they had in previous games. I think there was a late penalty against Will Johnson as well. I'm not sure if at that point the game was kind of already in hand, but a play that probably the best cornerback in college football doesn't usually make. I guess maybe second best to Travis Hunter as an all-around player. And then USC as well, they've kind of, they looked decent in that win over Michigan. I don't think they played their best game, and they certainly didn't against Minnesota. PJ Fleck gets a big win for the Golden Gophers and pulls the upset against the Trojans. A couple other teams, I mentioned Georgia. They, along with Penn State, both kind of had uninspiring home wins this week. They didn't look bad, but they didn't look great either. They didn't look like Ohio State and Oregon did. I think those two teams, obviously with Texas being on a bye, like I said earlier, those two teams looked like championship potential teams. Georgia and Penn State, not as much, and then obviously all the other teams that lost. College football is in the air, and this might be the perfect storm for Curt Cignetti. How about those Hoosiers? Curt Cignetti's Indiana team was the first to reach bowl eligibility at 6-0. Miami did later in the night, but they were the first one to do it. Those two are the only teams to reach 6-0 so far. They had an impressive, a comfortable win at Northwestern, 41-24, and they're third nationally in points per game and fifth in yards per game total. Curtis Rourke leads the passing attack. I think they rank 11th in passing yards per game. They have a pretty balanced rushing attack as well. They do lean on the pass a little bit more. Their schedule, I think, sets up really nicely. They get a tough test, home against Nebraska. The Cornhuskers are playing better. They notched a good win over a tough Rutgers team at home this week. That's going to be a 5-1 team against the 6-0 team, so I'm really looking forward to that game between the Cornhuskers and the Hoosiers. That one is on October 19th. That game is pretty loaded, but with Alabama's loss and Tennessee's loss, the slate that week doesn't look as good. I could see potentially, I think both of these teams are on a bye, so they're going to have those records for that game. I could see game day potentially going to Bloomington, Indiana. I mean, if I'm in that room, I would consider it. They're probably going to go to Georgia, Texas, but I think that certainly is honestly, it sounds crazy, but I think it's worthy consideration. Then they're at Michigan State. I think that's a winnable game. Home against Michigan, the way the Wolverines are playing, I think that's also a winnable game. And then they travel to Ohio State, and they're home against Purdue. Sitting at 6-0, I think the floor for this team is probably a 3-3 finish. So 9-3, you're probably not in college football playoff contention. I think a ceiling for them, though, is legitimately 11-1. I think the fact that they get Nebraska and Purdue, probably two of the tougher teams at home, I think those are games they can win. Road games at Michigan State. At Ohio State is probably where their loss comes, but I think home against Michigan is winnable as well, the way the Wolverines are playing. So how about those Hoosiers? And then how about our military service academies? Army and Navy are both 5-0 for the first time since World War II. The last time both Army and Navy were undefeated through 5 games was 1943. So both of those teams have been playing really good football, and that game to close out the regular season, the Army-Navy game has a legitimate chance to be a college football playoff decider. I mean, Boise State's probably going to be that team, but if these teams keep winning, that would include, I think, for Navy against Notre Dame. I'm not sure if Army plays Notre Dame as well. I'll verify that with a little bit of text here. But especially if they can win one of those games, and maybe even if they lose, that's a quality loss. If one of these teams can win the American Conference, that would also be huge. So very much exciting to look forward to that. A couple other teams on legit watch, as I'm going to phrase it here. Clemson continues to impress after their loss to Georgia to open the season. I think we can kind of look past that at this point because I think they've really turned things around since then. I'm not going to keep mentioning it. They played well against the Florida State team that is in a major tailspin, dropping to 1-5. Iowa State as well picked up another win. They beat Baylor this week. Boise State notched another win over, I believe, Utah State this week. And then SMU, the Mustangs, improved to 5-1. They got a win on the road at number 22 Louisville. So they've been playing really good football as well. They were one of the teams to play in week 0, so they have had a bye, but they have had put together a really good season so far. And I think the ACC is wide open, so I would definitely keep an eye on the Mustangs. But those are my takeaways from the Week 6 action. I think it was a week of plenty of chaos and excitement. I'm very much, though, looking forward to that top 3 matchup coming up this next week. I'll do probably a full deep dive preview on that game. But that's all for this episode of College Football Talk with Peter Burtnett. Thank you so much for watching, and keep an eye out for that Week 7 Ohio State-Oregon preview. Peace.